The Common Sense Engine presents Ideologies. The Common Sense Engine, or COSEEN, attempts to optimize the political and economic system. For more details, please watch the channel's featured video. In this clip, we share our takeaways from studying ideologies. Our approach is based on curiosity and openness. Regardless of whether we believe in or agree with an idea, we can always learn from it. So, let's see some of the messages that we have considered upon designing COSEEN, the system of collective intelligence. Democracy, meaning that people rule in Greek, taught us that community decision-making should be based on a voting mechanism, and all people should be enabled to participate with equal voting power. Liberalism emphasizes the importance of freedom. Individuals ought to be free to do as they wished unless they caused harm to others. COSEEN is a framework to find the consensus, the balance of the individual wills. Progressives remind us that the world is ever-changing. In fact, many of us saw in our lifetime how technologies like the internet, mobile phones, or GPS became essential parts of our daily life, while very few of us would have guessed this just a few decades ago. COSEEN accelerates that progress by creating a real-time decision-making process. You don't have to wait until the next elections, build a professional career, or convince billionaires if you have a great thought. The system motivates people to watch out for good ideas. Conservatism, on the other hand, helps us remain down to earth. History repeats itself. Why would we reinvent the wheel and throw out the good old traditions that worked for decades, centuries, millennia? COSEEN does not ban or mandate anything. It lets the voluntary community sort out whatever they want to keep or change. Another exciting thing about progress is that while we collect more and more information and understand the world better and better, we also lose knowledge over time. We all have fading memories about events that probably no one will ever be able to recall again, VHS cassettes or floppy disks that no one will ever play again, although we recorded them for eternity. On a different timeline, our ancestors should have known much more about survival in nature, about animals, or about food than us. An interesting thought experiment, the Silurian hypothesis even questions whether we would be able to detect a prehistorical civilization, and, likewise, how long the footprint of our civilization would be detectable after we go extinct. Now let's look at two characteristic economic schools that have a large influence on today's world. Capitalism teaches us to build up our life step by step and capitalize on what we, as proud and free individuals, have already achieved. Socialism reminds us that we are social animals, we must collaborate and show solidarity. COSEEN lets people fine-tune, they should collaborate, but it is up to them which communities they join, and they can also try to make a living from their projects if they wish. They can set the importance of individual performance on a scale. Capitalization of wealth works in COSEEN as well, but only within one generation. Money cannot be inherited. The next interesting duality of concepts is globalism versus localism. On one hand, we are all experiencing the same world and facing the same challenges in life. Why should someone do the same job at the same company for way less, just because they live somewhere else? On the other hand, forcing our values or customs on others, like what often happens during colonization, has its downside as well. Therefore, COSEEN is a loose network of voluntary communities, all of which may be anything between a couple and a group that includes everyone. This leads us to another significant idea, the concept of nation-states. Nation-states are often criticized for causing suffering, wars, dividing people, and so on. The most known alternative is a global government, which also raises concerns due to the further concentration of power. COSEEN cuts the Gordian knot by replacing the state, rather than the nation. In this new world, nations become voluntary communities, therefore they can preserve their identities while having minimal impact on those who do not want to join them just because they happen to be stuck within some artificially created borders. They may join another or multiple nations if they wish. Now let's see some of the popular ideas of recent times. Populism contrasts the people against the elite, the establishment. In COSEEN, there is no elite, so this problem is solved. The Occupy movement shed light on serious issues in the political and economic systems, like inequality, or concerns around global financial structures and governance. COSEEN is a framework to gain consensus in solving these questions. Green politics and climate activism are built around ecological sustainability. Sustainability is at COSEEN's heart. It is the only criterion to start or maintain a business. However, unlike green politics, COSEEN is a voluntary framework that encourages sustainable solutions and is not an administrative tool. Identity politics aims to end the oppression of certain social groups. COSEEN, from a different perspective, cultivates a world of voluntary communities, where social mobility makes oppression meaningless, therefore unlikely. Political correctness promotes the avoidance of offensive language in the hope of getting rid of its negative consequences. COSEEN takes a somewhat different approach. It encourages people to express their opinion, point out logical fallacies or biases in opinions, and to that end, self-educate. In COSEEN, anonymity mitigates the negative impacts of offensive language, while rewarding popular or highly debated ideas makes insults, just like racism or sexism, counterproductive. When we talk about rights, we usually mean norms and rules that are essential to any civilization. However, there is one problem with this concept. Rights need to be enforced, and that requires a powerful actor, a state, for example, with a monopoly on the use of violence. Unfortunately, that monopoly, just like any other, can be and is misused. Yet, from an evolutionary point of view, we all have innate abilities, and natural selection, the survival of the fittest, evolved along with rights that are supposed to defend the most vulnerable. COSEEN does not create power centers to enforce rights. Instead, it limits the power of everyone, so the individuals are neither able nor motivated to oppress others. Finally, let's talk about corruption. Although corruption is not an ideology, it usually happens when ruling ideologies face the boundaries of reality, when ideals sink into the sea of bureaucracy. Corruption, just like business, is quid pro quo by nature, the reconciliation of supply and demand that is at the heart of free market capitalism. Therefore, the distinction between these is a moral dilemma. For example, today's opioid epidemic in the U.S. is a consequence of what was considered normal business practices just 1 or 2 decades ago. Pharma companies convinced doctors to prescribe more and more painkillers through professional sales reps, sponsoring research and conferences. In most of the cases, they did not lie explicitly, just promoted the facts that helped them to sell, while they did not advertise counterarguments. That is how an inherently corrupt system can emerge, even if all participants have good intentions. Another example is when philanthropists donate to charities, it results in tax avoidance. Let's assume the best scenario so that in return for the unpaid tax, the same amount goes to a charity that uses it to deal with important social issues, more efficiently than the government would spend the tax. Even then, it means that the philanthropists bought the right of setting the political agenda from the government, so, it is just a question of perspective whether it's bribery or altruism. COSEEN does not impose taxes, and it gives oversight and veto over businesses to society. Therefore, I believe that in the world of collective intelligence, these ethical concerns have a much lower probability and impact on people.